Hello, and my name is Danish Ibrahim, and welcome to my presentation on Beam Search. I hope by the end of this you have a better understanding of what Beam Search is, what its applications are, and most of all, how it works. Beam Search is an algorithm that optimizes a best first search without drastically increasing computational power. Now, what that means is that you give an algorithm the ability to explore more than one possible match, but not an unlimited amount. Just the ones that have the highest probability of matching the input. How you tell beam search how much to explore is specified by the beam width. The beam width is a tunable value that lets the algorithm know how many top best nodes to explore and keep within memory. It will expand all possible choices and find the nodes with the highest probabilities of matching. Once it finds the best nodes, it removes or prunes the rest of the options. The probabilities are then multiplied together to create a score for the entire sequence. This continues until the end of the sequence is reached. Now, let's look at beam width a little bit closer. It is one of the two hyperparameters that can be adjusted by the one implementing the algorithm. Logically, it makes sense that the higher the beam width is, the more accurate our results will be. Our trade-off here is that this consumes more computational power and resources. It also increases the time it would take to produce our results. The inverse is also true. A smaller beam width would result in less accurate results, but much less taxing on our resources and computational power, and of course, much faster in producing the results as well. If we were to only keep the node with the best probability of matching, it would be referred to as a greedy search instead. This is the same thing as having a beam width equal to 1. I know that was a lot of words thrown at you, but let's make this a bit simpler by looking at an example. What we have here is a starting node at node S, and the probabilities of each node that will be explored in the process. To make it easy to understand, I've made the beam width equal to 2, meaning that at most the two highest probability nodes are kept and explored further while the others are pruned. In the table in the top right, we will be we will keep track of the nodes we are exploring at the current step, as well as keeping track of the nodes we have already explored previously. Let's get started. So we start at node S and find the two best nodes to explore. This is simple for the algorithm as there's only two choices here, node A and node B. Note at the top table we have transcribed the node we have explored already, node S, and the nodes we are currently exploring, node A and node B. Moving on, branching from node A is node C and node D, and branching from node B is node E and node F. Take a look at the probabilities for each of these nodes. Node D and node F were chosen because they had the highest probabilities among our four choices. If the highest probabilities were instead node C and node D, they would instead be selected. It doesn't matter that they root from the same parent node, node A. Beam search will always select the best beam width number of options to explore further. Next, the algorithm will again see all possible options rooted from node D and node F and determine that node H and node J are the best candidates to be explored further. Finally, we get to the end of the sequence, node L and node N. Here, beam search must make a decision as to which of the two sequences is the best match to our input node S. It does this by multiplying the probabilities together from each branch. Whichever has the highest probability will be the one that is selected by the algorithm. So after doing that, we can see that the branch of SADHL has a higher probability than the branch of SBFJN. So this is the sequence that would be selected as a possible match to our input. Hopefully that made things a bit clearer in terms of how beam search works. But don't worry, we'll go over a real life application of beam search as well. It should help to make you better understand what beam search is and its method of choosing. First, let's go over the practical uses of beam search. Beam search is used in our lives every day. Search engines, of course, use this to find the best web pages to match your search criteria. If you are someone who enjoys text messaging, you run into Beam search there as well with autocomplete or predictive text. It determines what your next word is going to be based on the words you have already inputted, and usually displays the top three matches of the next word, at least on iMessage. Autocorrect is also using Beam search in order to determine if what you've inputted actually is what you meant to input based on the words you have already typed. This can be useful for misspellings of common words, but is in no way perfected. We've all been burned by the autocorrect method at one time or the other. I'll just let you read that. This is a humorous example of how autocorrect can completely misinterpret what you mean to say. Remember to always proofread your text before you send them. The last example here is language translation, and I've bolded that because I wanted to go into an example regarding language translation and how Beam Search works with that. So in our example, let's say you're going to Google Translate and you have a Spanish phrase here, me voy a dormir muy tarde. And I want to know what the English translation is. Given a beam width equal to 3, what is the English translation? So if we go into it, we have let's say that we have um, a imaginary, like a vocabulary of 10,000 possibilities to match our first word. This is just make it simple. Um, we have 10,000 possibilities that we can have for our first word of our translation. So we have a beam width of 3. So we need to choose the best 3 candidates to start the translation, and and we will, based off of that, branch out further. So how that looks formulaically is the probability of Y1, meaning word number 1 of the translation, given our X, our Spanish input sentence we are attempting to translate. So we have 10,000 possibilities, all with their probabilities listed. You'll see that the word we are looking at is in the Y1 spot of the formula. I won't be doing this going forward, but I wanted you to see it here so you can make that connection. Beam Search will choose the best 3 candidates to start our sentence with and explore the rest of the translations moving forward from them. So, as you can see, Beam Search has determined that the words I, me, and sleep are the most likely words that the translation should start with since they have the highest probabilities. Now what happens next is that the algorithm creates 3 copies of itself, one for each choice we have selected in the previous step. The formula has now updated to the probability of Y2, meaning word number 2 of the translation, given Y1 and X, our first word selected, and our input Spanish sentence respectively. So what we are now asking is 3 questions. If Y1 is I, what is the next likely word? What if Y1 is me? What's the next likely word for that? And of course, the same goes for the word sleep. What's the next word if the first word is sleep? So as you can see, after going through all 30,000 words and their probabilities with regards to being the next word in the translation, we select the 3 best candidates, since our beam width is 3, and we'll remove the rest of the options from our memory. In this case, it is the 3 words circled here, meaning the best 3 sequences with potential to be the best translation of our Spanish input sentence is I am, I will, and sleep will. You'll notice that our Y1 word, me, did not have any words selected by the algorithm as a possible translation of our Spanish sentence. This means that Beam Search can drop this branch entirely from our possibilities, concluding that the translation of the Spanish sentence will not start with me. Going forward, it will still select the three best candidates for our translation, but only from sequences that begin with I am, I will, and sleep will. Let's take a look at our sequence probabilities up until now. The front runner is I am, with the highest combined probability. I will is not that far behind. However, sleep will doesn't seem to be keeping up with the first two, and makes it unlikely that it will be the one chosen at the end. We don't know for sure yet, but we can make an educated guess that this will not be our translation that Beam Search will choose. If we were to continue doing this, our next sequence would be trying to find Y3, or word 3, given Y2 and Y1 in our Spanish input sentence, X, followed by Y4 given Y3, Y2, and Y1 and X, and Y5 given Y4, Y3, Y2, Y1, and X, and so on until the translation is complete. At every step, a new probability is calculated by multiplying the probability of our current word in the sequence to the other probabilities already calculated. As you can imagine, multiplying so many probabilities together, which are numbers between 0 and 1, to obtain the total probability of a sequence could result in a very small number. Storing numbers like these can result in something called numerical underflow, which is where the absolute value of a calculation result could be smaller than a computer is equipped to handle and store without truncation or rounding. When we compare so many probabilities with one another, it is important to have that value represented exactly, at least in a way where we can determine if the probability of one word or sequence is higher than another word or sequence. To solve this potential issue, we can take the log of the product of probabilities. Since taking the log of a product is the same thing as taking the sum of logs for each probability, we can create an algorithm that accounts for this at every step of the process easily. So if we go back to our translation problem, I'm going to go ahead and ruin the ending for you and tell you that the translation above is the sequence that ultimately wins and is selected by our beam search algorithm as the best possible translation for our Spanish sentence. If we multiply all of our probabilities together for our winning sequence, we get a very long number, as I've shown here, which is about 1.8% if you were to convert it to a percentage. If we were to round it to 0.0182, or something numerically easier for anyone to read, it could potentially cause errors in terms of what sequence is truly the best. We need to keep this value as is with all the digits, or we can take the log of each probability and simply add the probabilities together instead. This is what the probability of the sequence would be if we were to do just that. In terms of a computer remembering that number, it is much easier and less taxing than just remembering the probability as is. We are also at no risk of having different rankings since the log function in its essence is a monotonically increasing function, which means if our goal was to maximize the probability of a sequence, it would be the exact same as maximizing the log probability of a sequence. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, wouldn't Beam Search just try to create shorter translations since this would allow it to have less probabilities multiplied to it, resulting in a larger overall probability than a sequence that had more words in it? If you were asking yourself that, I would say good question. The answer to that is the algorithm takes this into account as well. Beam Search attempts to combat this issue with a form of normalization by dividing the calculated probability by the total number of words in a translation, or tokens as they are referred to in the algorithm. The other aspect of this is a value for alpha, which is to help curb the normalization. You would multiply the resulting probability by 1 over t sub y to the alpha power, which is the same as dividing by the number of words in the translation. The alpha value can be adjusted to a number between 0 and 1. where 0 provides no normalization because anything raised to the power of 0 is equal to 1, and 1 provides the maximum normalization. Anything raised to the power of 1 is equal to the original value, in this case, the full token value. While this can be adjusted however the user sees fit, a popular choice is to start with alpha equals to 0.07 and fine tune it from there. Now that we've gone over the inner workings of beam search, let's take a look at the full equation. So as you can see here, this is our full equation. If we were to define all of these terms, T sub y is the number of tokens or words, if we're doing a translation, in the sequence. X is our initial input. In this case, it's the full sentence that needs to be translated from Spanish to English. Y, words that have been or have yet to be predicted within the algorithm. So Y is for every word in the algorithm or every word that's going to come. T, lowercase t, is the current word number being predicted in the sequence for our translation. Either word 1, word 2, word 3. It could be same thing as y1, y2, y3. That is the number that is currently being predicted in the sequence. And of course, our alpha value is to curb the normalization of the probability, like we just went over. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation on beam search. I hope you learned something today about the inner workings of this amazing algorithm. I advise you all to do some research into this algorithm as it has many applications in today's world, especially in natural language processing. Once again, I appreciate you listening to me today. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions, and have a wonderful day.